Good morning, Nima. In continuation to our wills discussion that you remember we had not that long ago. Another thing that that could be, very interesting to our listeners is the topic of guardianship. I think a lot of us are used to the fact that we've got our spouse, we've got our kids, something happens to us, automatically, no questions asked, the guardianship would just go to our spouse. But is that really the case? How do wills come in the context of guardianship?
Right. It's a very, very important and good question. If you don't have a will, then like we talked about, they're going to apply basically the testamentary principles of law. And by those, you may not be able to have someone taking care of your children if you're gone and your spouse gone the way that you wish for. So we can have, like the DIFC basically has a specific will reserved for someone who actually only going to appoint guardians for their minor children. And that's guardianship will at the DIFC. You can have a different will that includes also guardianship provisions in that will, and that's the full will basically that the DIFC has. And that's not only reserved for appointing the guardians of your minor children, meaning that you can include assets, disposition of the assets, being real property, your bank accounts, and everything else, and also include appoint someone as a guardian of your minor children.
When we were discussing the guardian topic, Nima, how much freedom is there as far as the guardianship is concerned? Can actually a parent drawing up a will appoint anybody as a guardian for their children?
That's a good question, Isabella. Yes, anyone can appoint anybody as long as they're adults, and the appointment does not interfere with the public policies of the UAE.
Nima, another thing that I get asked about quite a lot is whether actually with a will it's mandatory to provide for all the assets in the UAE under that will. What if somebody actually only wants to include financial assets? Or maybe real estate only, right? Nothing else. Is there a solution available?
Yes, again, the DIFC has a solution for that need, basically. Like we talked about the guardianship will, that's reserved only like to appointment of a guardian of your will, and that will specifically is reserved for guardianship of your minor children. The DIFC has other types of wills for financial assets wills, for real estate, only wills, and also for businesses. A lot of our clients have businesses here, companies and corporations, and they're only concerned about that. Even though there are certain restrictions in the DIFC with the number of real estate that it can include in your will. However, the DIFC has these types of will that it can only include real estate, for instance, in your will. Question that a lot of my clients actually ask is, what if you only have certain shares in companies in the UAE and you don't have anything else? What is your advice to those individuals?
Well, I would still say that that it's very good for them to consider having a will, to actually have a will that concerns those holdings that they have. One of the things that I've seen over the years, which is quite unfortunate, is that every now and again a shareholder in a company passes away without the will, or if that will is actually available, right? Because we're talking about non-Muslim individuals, but then passing away without leaving a will may expose the business itself. In some situations, courts in the UAE will wait for the inheritance to be solved about that portion of the shares. Also, it may impact the access to bank accounts. Maybe the business's bank accounts will be frozen. Right. It may mean that the company is not able to pay salaries to its employees. All those liquidity and operational questions may arise. Having a will, though, which means that when the shareholder in a business is no more, then the heirs essentially are able to have their claims satisfied much faster. The court also knows what the disposition is supposed to be of those shares. And that means that there is really just a minimal interruption to the operation of the business itself.
So there is a will that actually covers the businesses only. If they're, if for instance the individual doesn't have anything else and they're only concerned about their shares in three entities here in the UAE.
Yes, and the Dubai International Financial Center, they offer wills for business owners, and that's the type of wills that is suitable precisely towards those clients who have ownership of shares in entities and they would like to secure inheritance of those. There is a product like that.
Okay, great. That's good to know. What if now, if that same individual, let's say, has different types of asset that also is, going to be included in the will? What would you do in that? What would you advise in that scenario?
In that suggestion, I think, Nima, I would say, how about you go for a full will? Okay. For a will that's comprehensive, that actually extends to any types of assets that the testating individual can include, because then that type of a will provides for that individual as a parent, as a spouse, as a business owner, maybe as an owner of some financial assets as well. Perhaps that individual that has a business naturally would have a car in the UAE, right? They would, I'm sure, have a bank account in their individual name because they're not only a shareholder, but also they have to really function as an individual in the UAE. So I would highly recommend that they consider a full will for that situation. Nima, I think we've covered really a number of different aspects concerning wills, all very informative. And in fact, one thing that immediately comes to mind is that the UAE has really continued to evolve its legal regime. That's right. That those wills that we see, right? Would you agree that there are more different types available now than years ago?
That's correct.
So there is this positive development, and another aspect for us, all of us, I think, to consider is that so many of us continue to live in the UAE. We love the country, we really want to be part of it, and we live longer in the UAE than people used to maybe decades ago. And all of those reasons probably mean that it's so important for us to consider having a will.
Right.
And on that note, I would like to thank you, Nima. It was really a pleasure having you here.
Likewise.
For our viewers and the listeners, thank you very much. We hope you found our wills-related content informative. And if you have any questions, if you are interested in learning more or actually assistance in drawing up a will, please let us know. We're here to help you.